We have just been so delighted by the success of Inspired Journeys and having the opportunity to meet with 31 authors. And so by way of introduction, I want to introduce Hannah Osborne, who is a teacher. She's a translator, she's an artist, she's a mother. And when the mood is striking her, she still is not only just gorgeous, but she likes bodybuilding, gardening, crafting, and creations in her spare time. She has told a harrowing story in Inspired Journeys. I reread it again today, and I am so touched by her story, which was so important for us to include in this collective anthology, because it is brave, because it is daring, because it is ruthless and brutally told, simply told, elegantly told, intelligently told story about struggle and abuse and divorce in Switzerland. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. Hi. It's an honor to be here. It was published last June, and actually it was quite a moment, because I was actually in recovery from an operation when it was published, and life is a roller coaster to
pick up on our pre-conversation.
Yeah,
I was just telling
exactly.
you that I've just spent, I've been in 7 different parks in Florida riding roller coasters. So yeah, it has its ups and downs. And I won't forget, we were on the WhatsApp chat thread with everybody as we were going for the Amazon bestseller status. And you were sharing and promoting from your hospital bed. And that was really daring and kind and crazy.
What else was I gonna do? Laying there in bed, gaping wound. So, but it was a wonderful time, actually, for me, for that to have happened, because I really needed something positive in my life. Because while I was there, I found my family was having some issues. My mom was declining rapidly at the time, and I would promote the book, and then I would go and order food for my mom online. And that's another amazing thing, is that with this technology, people were like, "Oh my God, how are you getting your mom food?" And I was like, I called up a pizzeria in Florida, literally, and they would deliver. And so. Yeah, it was quite an emotional time, and but it's writing the story. It took me longer than most of the other contributors, if I am understanding things correctly, because it's difficult to put into words and to know when to stop. I know that I wrote actually double what was actually finally published, because there's no way to put it simply when you're living through abuse. There's and the time that it takes for you to realize that it's abuse, and to get the message, because I remember when the divorce was first, separation was first happening. I was on the phone with my mom for well over an hour, explaining to her, the big picture. I mean, I didn't give her all the nitty-gritty details that a mother doesn't probably need to know, or want to know. But at the end of our conversation, she said, but Hannah, he never hit you, did he?
Right.
And that was a verbal punch in the gut, because I had just laid bare my pain and everything I had been through, or everything that I could reveal to her. And I actually said to her, I wish he had. because then maybe somebody would have believed me over the years, you know.
Emotional abuse and emotional enmeshment, and the hellacious divorce, as you describe, that, as I understand, went on for over 8 years, and of course not only impacts the couple and all extended family, but your precious children and your relationship with those children. And Hannah, you're articulate, you're beautiful, you are well-traveled, you became Swiss decades, in fact, more than 20 years ago. I mean, it's not like you didn't fight for your rights early. It's not like you don't have your degrees from higher education, right? And I think that for all of those reasons, that was one really important for Denise Esther Berkey of Swiss Made Story, who is a co-creator of this book. It's why we wanted to have your story included, because I think when abusive entanglement happens, for those not indoctrinated, we can think that it happens to someone lesser, and not someone so well-traveled and dignified. And I think that by including your story, we are igniting conversations about abuse. We are eradicating shame. We are minimizing stigma, I hope, and allowing ultimately for not only your salvation, but the salvation of everyone. I just think it's so important for women's stories to be told, and for us all to read these heroic adventures of lives really lived. These tales are true stories, as it says on the cover of the book, and the hardship and the resilience required to live these lives, where even motherhood itself was harmed or jeopardized or not dignified, really gets impacted. So thank you, if I can say thank you, for the bravery of sharing your story.
Very welcome. It can happen anywhere, it happens all over the world. And I know that was part of the imposter syndrome, was like my mother said, well, he never hit you. He didn't need to. And I think that's where.
But we also, at the end of your story, we get very, clear evidence that he did hit you with a car. So, I mean, he did hit you. Forgive me for interjecting. It's okay. I don't want to give your whole story away. I want people to go get the book.
Yeah, that happened. Yeah. That happened. And I think, I would like for the message to get out there even more. So, because it's so much more prevalent than people realize. I mean, I'm one woman who's gone through this, and I keep meeting other women who have also gone through the same, not the same, similar, or who are beginning on that path of trying to pull themselves out of a relationship that they can see is becoming or has been toxic. One woman that I recently met, her spouse, because they are still married, but they are separated, has said to her, "Oh, but you mustn't talk about this or that with the lawyers," trying to control her, trying to cover up assets and things like that. And it's like, whoa, here's the name of a good lawyer, honey, because he's going to try to pardon the expression, but to stiff you, and I think what I didn't know when I wrote The Divorce Had Happened, yes, because it was such a long deal, sometimes I can't remember the order of events, because there's just been so much.
Which is also the impact of trauma on our brain, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, the science shows that we can recover this.
Yeah, it's
but it does take its toll.
Even earlier today, my son, I live with just my youngest son now, and he gets a little bit annoyed at that because my memory is just like, oh my God.
For what it's worth, everybody's memory has a little something going on with it. So.
But I tell him, just give me a hint as to what it is I'm forgetting here. Because I asked him earlier, I said, what should we have for supper tonight? And he went, and he looks at me and I'm like, am I forgetting something? And he goes, mm-hmm. Like, can you give me a hint? And he was like, nope, you're going to think of this. And I went, pizza, right, we're making pizza. And he went, bravo, Hannah, Mom. But it's, and that is something that I did not have a problem with before.
No,
so
of course not.
It really is. And I think, when I first went to see a psychiatrist, because I think that's also something that a lot of people feel shame to go and see a doctor. And what's very ironic is that it's, in the case of narcissism, it's the victim who gets help. And then it's the victim who is made to look like she's crazy by the court system and by the lawyers and by the narcissist. And they
we have a long way to go. The laws in most Western countries are still written by men. And we were saying earlier, I don't remember who's this quote, it's not me, but the patriarchy is not the shark, it's the water, and we're all swimming in it. And so systemic abuse can happen anywhere, but it is still abuse. And when you go and seek help, I mean, this is just also in Switzerland, mental health is not treated like the body in the same way. And for the longest time, there were no emotional abuse laws on the docket, right? There was battery, but there wasn't even financial abuse laws on the docket for the longest time. And so these, I think so. Don't quote me. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer.
And they're not applied.
Well, and this is the thing. And so, I agree that the stigma and shame can hold people back from getting needed care, and getting needed care can be used against you in a court of law. And of course, this is its own violence.
It's another notch in the belt of what you've been through. There's the verbal abuse, there's the emotional abuse, there's the financial abuse, there's the gaslighting, I guess, is part of emotional abuse. And then you try to get help. And my psychologist, may he rest in peace, because he unfortunately passed in the spring of 2020.
So sorry.
He was older, but not that old. And he was, although it was, although he was a man, he saw right through what was happening. And he's the one who was like, you have to get out of there and you never have to go back to him. He was so clear, and he was so like, he was finally somebody who took what I was explaining seriously. And didn't, he questioned me. Of course he questioned, but he didn't deny or turn it to make it like, you are crazy, because
the patterns seem very well known, and so I think to a trained individual, the patterns are known. And I'm sure in your experience of now running into many women, you've indicated to me, when it comes to toxic abuse, apparently there is an equality on that. Men and women abuse
Oh, yeah.
equally. However, my understanding from the research of Dr. Ramani, for anybody who is looking up narcissistic abuse, I think she's an incredible expert. But Dr. Ramani has a ton of free videos on YouTube, and I don't work for her, but I think she's great. And as soon as you start hearing these stories, you can see the patterns, and you can start to identify these red flags. And I'm sure that you've seen this in the lives of others that you've run into contact with.
Yeah. And it's, humanity is very equally distributed in these traits. There are also narcissistic women who are abusive to men, but because we live, this is my interpretation, but because we live in a culture, particularly in Switzerland, where it's very much the men who go out to work, the men who, I was told that I should have asked my husband's permission to move out of the house.
Hold on, you didn't move out of the house, right? Like, you also moved for work, as I understood it, right?
Yeah.
You had gotten a job that required a move, and you were supposed to ask for permission in order to move. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you kind of go, we're in the middle of a divorce proceeding. Why do I still need to ask his authorization? This makes no sense,
Right. You weren't leaving the country. You weren't, you weren't crossing borders with the children.
An hour away, which for an American is like, poof,
Yeah, it's a commute, daily commute.
Exactly. I mean, I was commuting 2 hours one way for the last few months for a job.
Let me pull you up for a second. And just since you said as an American, I do think it's interesting for our listeners, how do you identify culturally? Because you've now been in Switzerland for years. I understand you're a Swiss passport holder. Congratulations for 20 some odd years.
22 in July.
22 years.
June, it will be 22 years. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I identify as Swiss American. I've lived here more than half my life. So there are days when I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could, I do miss my family and friends from the States. Because of the divorce, because of financial situations, I haven't been able to see my family nearly as much as I should have been able to. And I say that I choose my words, not could have, but should have, because the decisions that were made in the divorce proceedings put me into a financial situation where I couldn't go back. It was my uncle who invited me and my children. The last time my children were in the States was in 2014.
Wow. So the financial predicament that you've been put in has been inexcusable and against any sort of norm of fairness
absolutely.
Within the courts. But if I may, just by way of raising these yellow and red flags for anybody else who might be facing toxic relationships or entanglements, in your marriage, were you also isolated? Were you able to travel at will and spend money at will and go to your family and or once a year an annual visit?
Nope.
And why do you think that is?
Control. Control. No. Initially, we would go back like once a year at Christmas, or when my eldest was born, we went back 6 weeks after he was born, and it was the summertime, so it was lovely. But of course, my parents sold the house that I grew up in that summer. So instead of having a nice, relaxing holiday, I got to help them empty their house with a newborn. Yeah, it was fantastic. They sleep a lot, but and then it got to be less and less frequent.
Yeah. The isolation is a tactic, right?
Oh, completely,
known tactic.
And within Switzerland, when I meet people and they're like, oh, how long have you been here? Where have you lived? And I'm like, well, I landed in this village, and then a year later I moved to this village. That's when I met my now ex. After 1 year in Switzerland. A year later, I moved in with him. 2 years later, we moved. 2 years later, we moved. 2 years later, we moved. And I will never forget nor forgive when I was pregnant with my second child. We had a lovely apartment. I had a really wonderful neighbor who also had small children, and we really connected. And unfortunately, the building had an outdoor spiral staircase, and the laundry was in the basement.
Mm.
And we didn't know it yet, but I had undiagnosed hip dysplasia.
Oh, ouch.
And that's why I had to have operations. Anyway, so when I got pregnant with my second child, our second child, I was like, oh my God, I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt. I'm afraid I'm going to drop the older child or fall down these stairs, or, it was just like no, I don't want to do this. And I remember I was very sad about moving, because we moved back to a city, to La Chaux-de-Fonds. I was sad about leaving this new friend that I'd made. And my husband said, oh, well, anyway, you'll never see her again. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, it's just the way it is. In Switzerland, when you move, you don't keep contact. We are still super close.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
So close. And, she has been an amazing support during 7 years ago or so, when I had moved out of our house because it was being sold and I didn't want to be, kicked out in the middle of a school year or something. I was in such a bad financial situation because of the court leaving all the expenses on me, even though it was co-owned with my ex-husband, that at one point she actually met me halfway in order to help pay for my gas.
Wow.
She would help me. So many people helped me along the way. And that's also what I tried to convey.
What is it like to have people show up for you like that? I mean, to have this teaming and those who get it.
It's humbling.
Yeah, it's humbling.
Really, really humbling.
Yeah. So I think you had opened up this conversation with this idea that it's a roller coaster, life. And I do feel like, I wish all roller coasters had, that harmony, that stop and start at the same level. I'm not sure that life necessarily models that.
Really.
I think some people really have a lot more ups than downs, and vice versa. It's not always equitable, this roller coaster ride that we're on. So I want to ask you a coaching question that we've been asking all of the authors. Which is how do you turn things around for yourself? How do you, when you're feeling blocked or stymied, when your inner voice turns so negative or even toxic, and you find forgiving yourself difficult, or you're accosting yourself for this, that, or the other reason, when you're behaving in an unloving way towards yourself, how do you pivot that?
I come from strong stock, we'll put it that way. I am the bearer of my two grandmothers' first names, Hannah and Ruth. Hannah left Chiswick, England when she was about 16, went to Canada, and it took over 50 years for her to go back to England. 2 world wars happened before she could go back to see her family. So she raised 7 or 8 children through the Depression. My other grandmother, Ruth, was born to immigrants in Brooklyn. I thought she had come over from Norway on the boat, but no, she was actually born to Norwegian immigrants. And I really pull a lot of strength from my own family heritage and from thinking about what my grandmothers went through, what my father went through as a child, and what he overcame. My father was a very good businessman, but I have a picture of him and me here on my desk. Ironically, it's from just before he walked me down the aisle. Oh, well, but it's, I keep it there because I have a lisp, and he stuttered as a child. And it was somebody got him into musical
theater
in school. And he had a fantastic singing voice, and he always sang. I mean, every time, from the time I was a child, I never missed, I don't think, a Sunday where he would be singing in church. And he told me a story once about, a couple of stories. He was in school, and he didn't have a clean shirt. They were so poor, he didn't have a clean shirt. So he grabbed one of his sister's shirts, and buttons don't button the same way, and kids made fun of him, right? Yeah. And he was this skinny, and another time there was a girl in his class who had just this most beautiful handwriting, and my father's handwriting was like chicken scratch in the farmyard. I mean, if he had been in school today, he probably would have been diagnosed with dyspraxia, possibly dyslexia, I don't know. But he said something to his teacher. I think he might have been in high school at that point. And the teacher said, "Jimmy, I'd rather spend an hour trying to decipher what you write than the time it takes me to read her beautiful handwriting, because you actually have something to say." That's and powerful. I thought that was, he wanted to be a journalist. Unfortunately, he ended up, being a businessman and raising a family. But that stuck with me as well, the fact that he persevered. And I tell it to my kids, and I remind them where they came from. They didn't just come from, unfortunately, my dysfunctional union with their father. They also come from strong stock, and I guess
Angela used to say she never took the stage alone. She always took the stage standing on the shoulders of giants in her ancestry and those who have come before.
Yeah. Just this afternoon, I read, I'm always reading, sorry. I read about Gloria Vanderbilt and Christina Onassis, and everything that they had to overcome in their lives. I mean, you look at them and you're like, they were born into wealth. So was I. Not obviously not as wealthy as they, but but they had to overcome as horrible situations as well, and yeah, I just think sometimes, I have a roof over my head, got skint in the bank, but I've got loving children and loving family. And when it's really bad, my cats just come and curl up on me, take my dog out for a walk, and, I can go and walk for an hour. And that's also something
grounding.
Very grounding, because I was told when my two older children were 4.5 and 1.5, I was told that I had 3 to 5 years before I'd be in a wheelchair. And I said, "Oh, really? Could I have those x-rays, please?" And I walked home.
And so you've been walking ever since and have avoided this?
Yes, obviously.
I don't know. You're sitting in a chair. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm sitting in a chair.
I want to make sure.
No.
Make sure that you conclude that thought.
No. I mean,
those who don't know you,
probably the end of my life might be less mobile, but no. I've undergone four very big operations in order to maintain mobility, and
so you're a fighter and a champion and a thriver, and you've got bounce back to spare. I would like you to not have to bounce back from anything else for a long time. If given the choice between bouncing back or not bounce, but wouldn't it be nice if it was, wouldn't it be nice if it was just a little bit easier for you going forward? So I did just want to ask, when you're thinking about, or when you were thinking about writing this story, I'm sure you had to face your demons. And as you said, sometimes it's better to just get it out, even if you get it out in double the length allotted, and then you work on the editing of it.
Yeah.
Have you found some freedom in the telling, or have there been rewards that maybe you didn't expect, or even among the sisterhood, or now that you've read some of the other stories, have there been some upside?
Yeah, I have had a few people reach out to me, because they read my story and they were like, wow, really want to connect with you. And internally, and emotionally, I think it was very therapeutic to lay it down and to just, this is what happened. Yep. Next.
Yeah.
There's this expression, if you fall down 7 times, get up 8. I wish it were so few times.
It's, in your case, it's so true. It's like, so true.
Okay. I will touch on what we spoke about before, where, as I said in a little earlier, my mom was not doing well. And at the end of last year, I started a job. Within a couple of weeks, I was informed that my mother was really not doing well. And the employer said, "Oh, Hannah, family first. Yes, of course, you must go and see your mother." And I did that at the end of January, beginning of February. And the day I went back to work, I was very unceremoniously told that it wasn't going to work out just before the end of the trial period. So,
I'm so sorry.
Thanks. I like, knock me down. I'm a weeble. We wobble, we get back up, So I'm gonna find something else. I'm actually, if it's okay to say this, I'm actually currently collaborating with a wool mill. I mean, it was a
How fun is that?
It's really kind of fun. It's
by this you mean wool, like shearing sheep for wool.
Black sheep, yes.
In order to create what? So what is this collaboration? Do tell us what you're working on next.
Well, it's an association that's been around for going on 20 years. So next year they'll be having their 20th anniversary. Can I say the name of the association?
Yes, go for it.
L'Ind'ici.
L'Ind'ici
means wool from here. And the idea is to promote local, there's that whole movement to, consume local, produce local, blah, blah. And it's been around for almost 20 years, but it's still, in the associative functioning, if I can put it that way. And in 2017, they got like professional grade machines for carding and the sorting is still manual.
Wow.
They cannot get away from, but carding and
Spinning.
Spinning is like the last step, but yeah. And I'm really hopeful that my collaboration with them, because I'm kind of right now on a very small scale, going there and just trying to help and trying to light a fire under a few of the people, because I have a CAS. Do you say that in English?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I have a CAS in management, and I have a CAS in promotions for promouvoir une institution culturelle, promoting cultural institutions. And so I really want to be able to use that, and to help this association to become profitable.
So who do you need to meet? Who do you need? Ask for what you need. You're live.
Gosh,
you need to meet videographers to tell the story. You need to meet the local attaché. You need to meet anybody who wants to create or produce in wool, or who's going to buy local.
Yeah.
Right? People meet some designers who can make the initial designs.
Who would be interested in using local wool. And another important thing is farmers. Actually,
to provide the wool.
What is insane is that they don't know what to do with it, so they burn it.
Okay, so you want to collect from farmers as well?
Yeah, collect from local Swiss farmers, and Baba Black Sheep, have you any wool?
That's great. Well, that is a great next project.
Yeah.
And I do want to ask you one last question before concluding our call. And I'm so grateful for this time with you, Hannah. But when you're, well, that's my pleasure. It's our pleasure on behalf of me and Denise, and on behalf of the Inspired Journeys collaborative book that features now more than 100 women are involved. If we also look at the business directory, where, for those who don't know, at the back of the book, there really are some incredible advertisements so that you can buy local from women and support women's-headed businesses. But when you're thinking about your own legacy, and many say that we can't write our own legacy, that we don't necessarily get to design it or speak after we're gone. But when you think about your main message for the world, what do you think it is? Where are you sort of landing? What would your message be if your legacy maps out the way that you'd intend it?
I think my legacy is the education that I was able to give my own children by being there for them in those formative years. And sharing what I said earlier, Hannah and Ruth and James and Robert, and just it sounds hokey, but being the best mother that I could possibly be under the circumstances that I was living under, I think that's my legacy.
And why should the world value mothers and motherhood?
Because without mothers, there is no future to humanity. Quite simply, if children are being raised by the state or by people who are not
able to provide nurturing.
I'm sorry. I really am at a loss for the word, because I respect women and men who work in childcare. I think it's very important. But I do believe that society, for whatever reason, has kind of downgraded the importance of motherhood. it's quite ironic that's what I'm saying right now, because for so many years I was like, and this sounds awful, but I said, I didn't get an education to change diapers for the rest of my life. And that sounds horrible, because I love my children, and
fortunately, nobody changes diapers for the rest of their lives unless they really do work in a daycare.
But but the situation that I was in made me feel like that was all I was good for. And yet that was the most important job that I could ever have had. Ever.
You were horribly isolated. You made one friend, and even that was denied. I mean, just in the recounting of what you shared in this interview.
Yeah. And maid of honor.
Yeah. This is so there were lots of signs that I hope everybody does reach out and read your story, so that we can start to better understand the signs of abuse and neglect and isolation. Also as family members, not only targets of abuse, but as family members, as mothers, we don't want to pass this legacy on to our children. And for those fathers who have suffered, we don't want to pass this generational legacy on to our children. And yet, what has befalled you in your life, what you have gone through, is not your fault. And so I'd love to say that we can all resonate higher and stand in the light. And I do believe in the light and the ability to go dance over there. And so I do wish you tremendous success with Wool, with your abilities as cultural attaché to l'Indici, and I hope that you connect with the offices of tourism across Switzerland, because I'm sure that they would be a great resource for you to tap into the local farmers, and connect with other members of the book like Dev Seafield Rivers, who is also tied in and tapped in and tuned into permaculture and the ethos of permaculture. And so with all of that, I just want to thank you so much. You are beautiful, intelligent, kind, and resilient beyond measure. And it has been a privilege to really get to hear more about your story and the backstory and some of these losses that you have suffered, and how you bounce and stand and get up again and again, is more than admirable and more than heroic. And so I'm grateful for that example.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening, Hannah. Thank you for joining us.
You too. Thank you, Michelle.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.